1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in they Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the Hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters don't move, whatever click you choose.
Say what's cracking YouTube, it's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. For those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994 I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years to life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system, man. Without any further ado, we back. I told y'all, man, we tapping in with KC. KC started going to prison in 1978 when things was extremely different, man. So let's hop right up into it, man. KC, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Where did you grow up at and all that stuff?
I grew up in LA. I grew up on Western Imperial. More exactly, I grew up on the corner of 113th and Dinker.
To give the viewers a time period, when was you born and all that stuff?
I was born in 1957.
Okay.
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. Stayed there till I was about 5 or 6 years old. Then we moved to Chicago. I lived in Chicago for about 2 or 3 years. And then we moved to California. And we moved to California. We moved to 113th and Dinker. And to show you how it was back then, there was only 9 blacks that went to Washington High School when we moved over there.
What are your first memories of coming to LA and stuff, being that young? And
sunshine, and because you got to remember, in Chicago, it snowed and was cold all the time. So when we came out here, it was sunshine. They had palm trees everywhere. And you guys don't get to see it today, all of you young people, but there were fruit trees everywhere in Los Angeles. Everywhere.
Oh, see, I didn't know that either.
Pomona used to be a literal orange grove. Okay, every house in Pomona had orange trees in it. Now, Cucamonga didn't have homes; they were vineyards. Was nothing out there but vineyards. And Fontana, they used to call it Fontucky, because Fontana used to be a sundown town. A lot of people don't remember that, and so did Altaloma.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my generation growing up, I definitely remember that Fontana was. It was alleged, and I believe it was more than allegations, that that's where the head of the Ku Klux Klan was. And I also remember hearing a famous story of you had a black utility worker on a light pole. He was up there fixing the pole or whatever he was doing, and he got shot. So yeah, that was a very racist town, you know, when I was growing up, back when I was young, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all that stuff.
Exactly. So like I said, in the 60s, it was really bad.
Where did you go to school, high school and stuff out there?
I went to Woodcrest Elementary for about a year, and then they transferred us over to Century Park. And then for junior high school, I went to Henry Clay Junior High on 120th and Western, somewhere around there. And then after that, I went to Washington High School.
So for many of us, right, we remember LA as the home of the Crips and the Bloods, so on and so forth. But you actually grew up before that time period, before the origination of the Crips and the Bloods. So what was life like then, you know, growing up in an area that wasn't gang infested or, you know, known to have gangs like, as, you know, many of us know it to be today?
You know, it was all about black unity then. no matter what happened, it was all about black unity. And they had gangs, you know what I mean? Just like bounty hunters. Bounty hunters been around forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Chain gang, brims, avenues, all those are old street gangs, right?
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't about jumping people and beating them up and you in the wrong hood. It wasn't none of that. If you happen to be black and you went to the bounty hunter hood, and long as you wasn't over there trying to create problems, wasn't no problems. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? We used to go to parties over there. You know what I mean? Everybody used to go to parties and hang out. And you remember them little house parties back in the day?
Right,
Yeah,
right,
you can go to any hood, anywhere, anytime, and enjoy yourself because it was
right.
about black unity. Black people were together, and like a lot of people don't know. And I told a couple of dudes this, and when we was in prison, but everybody used to call each other young blood.
Right.
Everybody, that was a term that meant brother. Hey, young blood. You know what I mean? That was it. That was a
Right.
term used for blacks. Young blood.
And let me ask you a question, KC, because I know, my uncle, rest in peace, my uncle Dre. I mentioned him a couple times on here. You would be around his age, and I know when they grew up, they put a big emphasis on learning how to fight. Coming from the shoulders, they took pride in having squabbles. Before the guns and all that stuff kicked in, he used to take me in the backyard and show me how to hold my dukes and all that. At a young age, 5, 6, he would give me constant training. What was that like growing up in a period where there was no gunplay? If you got into it with an individual, y'all had to knuckle up.
It was better, a lot better, because there was two schools of thought back then. You were either part of the Jim Kelly era or the Muhammad Ali era, right? You either took up martial arts like Jim Kelly, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody wanted to be part of that group, and or you were boxing. You know what I mean?
Right,
And a lot of people gravitated toward boxing because it was easier and faster to learn. You know, and but if you fought and lost, you just went back and trained until you could, either draw or win. You know what I
right,
mean? You constantly tried to up your skills. And it wasn't no such thing as if you lost a fight that you would go back and come back with a knife or a batter. No, you lost, you just lost. You know what I mean? And everybody were men back then. Men could accept a loss.
right.
The problem was if you didn't fight. I seen some dudes fight for 5 minutes and then one dude got a lucky punch in and knocked out. But
Yeah,
he respected the dude he fought because dude hung with him until he got that lucky punch in.
right. So as long as you fought,
As long as you fought. And you were respected. Even in school. If you fought a good fight and lost, nobody looked down on you like, oh, he got his whooped. No, it wasn't none of that. It
right,
was like, man, dude can fight. And you would really look at people fight and you would think to yourself, no matter what happens, I don't want to fight his. You know what I mean?
right. Because at the very least he gonna fight. He ain't somebody that you gonna just push over. This dude is gonna fight, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, yeah, he gonna fight hard. So everything was smoother back then. But you know what? It was a lot more respect too, because would nobody fight you in front of your family, in front of your kids, in front of your mother.
Right.
Uh, it was a bunch of respect. It was like there's certain ways to do things, and they did them the right way back then.
When do you think you started getting into trouble outside in the streets?
Mine was a different story because I had a stepfather who we didn't see eye to eye. So I started hanging out with the homies in the streets. And the thing about it is when you hang out in the streets, you become of the streets.
Right.
So you young, you have no job skills, no nothing. So what are you gonna do to make money?
Something illegal.
Exactly. So and that's what happened. But when I first went to jail, I went to jail for something called incorrigible. And a lot of people never heard of that. But incorrigible means that your parents don't want you anymore. And today, if I was the same 12-year-old kid and my parents took me down to Lenox Sheriff Station and they told him we don't want him. Now today you'd have went to a group home or a foster home or something like that. Well, back then, if your parents didn't want you, that was a crime. That they act like you committed a crime, and so they put you in. They put you in jail, and they put me in jail, and I got time for that, right? And anybody could look up my record, and it'll say 12 years old, back in the early 70s. I was arrested and convicted of incorrigible, right?
Wow, that's crazy. So simply because your stepdad didn't want you around or whatever, and you was convicted of a crime.
I
Wow, that's
convicted of incorrigible. Now, here's the thing about that. You know, like I know, if you go to jail, there's certain crimes you do not want to admit that you have in jail.
right.
Okay, so you will lie and say anything. So when I was locked up at 12 years old, I'm in jail with dudes that commit attempted murder, robberies, burglaries, you know what I mean, stuff like that, right? So you can't sit there and say, "Oh yeah, I'm in jail for incorrigible." What? Man, they beat your
Yeah.
right? So when they would ask me, they would like, "Hey KC, what's up, homie? What you here for?" "Oh man, robbery, man. They caught me, right?" So everybody thought I was in jail for robbery, right? But it was. Now I'm gonna tell you why I did it. There was another dude, a white dude. His last name was Doodledorf, right? And he was in jail for incorrigible. And when they found out, they beat that boy within an inch of his life. Why, I don't know. So when they asked me what was I in jail for, you knew I wasn't gonna say incorrigible. You know what I mean? Robbery. You know. So that was my introduction in jail. And then people don't understand. Once you get in the system, it's hard to get out the system.
Because once you go one time, especially back then, they feel that if you make a mistake, that's the only solution to send you right back.
Right. And that's what happened to me. So when I did time, I came out on probation. Think about that. Your parents don't want you, so you go to jail and you come out on probation for basically committing no crime whatsoever.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. That you went to jail, you ain't did.
Exactly. So I came out on probation, and once you come out on probation, any little thing you do is a probation violation. They're ready to lock you back up.
Right.
So they would send me back to juvenile hall, and I was in and out. Man, I would stay out a week and get a violation and go back for a month and get out, stay out a week, and that was my whole, And I'm like, wow.
So when you first got sentenced to prison, what was your first crime in going to prison, and what year was that?
I got arrested in 1976 for burglary, and back then I was under the ISL. You know what I mean? And I got sentenced
Indeterminate sentencing law, right?
Indeterminate sentence. I got sentenced to 20 years to life
for a robbery.
19. Burglary.
So for one burglary they gave you 20 to life?
No, I had multiple burglaries. But understand this: burglary back then carried 5 to life. So they convicted me of 3 burglaries, and they found me. I had a pistol in my pocket when they arrested me. Possession of a firearm back then was 5 to 10. So the judge sentenced me running bow-legged, which means you serve one sentence, then you serve another sentence for the people who don't know. And then all together, it came to 20 years to life.
And so off a life sentence back then, how much time did you have to do before you was eligible for a parole hearing or whatever they did back then?
You never knew. They never knew. They take you when they want to take you. They just wake up one day and say, "Hey, you go on the board today." Like now, you have to serve so much, you know what I mean, because of the determinate sentencing law. Then, if you had 20 years to life, they can take you in 19 years.
And so that's why famously George Jackson, for those who are familiar with his case, that's why he did so much time. I believe he had a 7 to life on a gas station robbery.
Yeah. And he wasn't supposed to do more than 7 or 9 years, and he ended up getting killed. I think he was about 11 or 13 in, and that
Right.
was a big issue because he was way past his uh release date.
So on that first life sentence that you were sentenced to, how did you come from under that?
A couple of months later, I never knew. I never knew anything because you don't follow the law when you're a kid.
Right.
They came to my cell and gave me new paperwork, and it says that under the DSL, the determinate sentencing law, your time has been recomputed to 6 years
Mm. So
because
you
what
went
they
from
did
20 to life to 6 years.
to 6 years. They said because the way it worked was you couldn't unless somebody had like violence, you couldn't give them all of those uh, consecutive sentencing stacked up.
Right. Okay.
They gave me the first time, and when they computed it, burglary carried 2, 3, and 4. They gave me 3 years, the middle term. On the second burglary, they gave me you could only get 1/3 of the middle term. So on the second burglary, I got 1/3 of the middle term, which
Okay.
was 3 years. So they gave me another year. That made 4 years. Then the other burglary, the same thing, another year. They gave me 5 years. Then on the gun, they gave me a year.
Uh-huh.
So that made 6 years. So that's how it came out.
So let's hop into what was prison like when you got to prison. What was because once again there was no Crips and Bloods at that time, right? Or were there?
No, no, it was, but not in the prison system.
Okay. So
Okay,
what was prison like?
prison in California, they only had 9 prisons. Okay, and the majority of those, I would say, out of 9, probably about 6 of them were in Northern California.
Uh-huh.
The only Southern California prisons they had was Chino, Tehachapi, and CRC.
Okay.
So when you came to prison, you learned quick because the brothers there were still under um, Black Panther mentality. Each one teach one. Okay, you didn't harm another brother. You didn't rape another brother. You didn't disrespect nobody black, staff or convicts. Okay, and you didn't. There were certain things you just didn't do. When I first came from the streets, the N word was part of my vocabulary. And when I got to prison, I was like, I walked around talking to a few people I had met and knew and say, "Hey, check this out." And some brothers looked at me, and later on they caught me and pulled me to the side and said, "Hey, young homie, we don't use that word up here." I'm like, "What word?" They said that N word, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And for the rest of the day, I was good. But the next day, when you young, you forget.
Right.
And I was like, "Oh, be tripping." 3 dudes pushed up on me immediately, and they pulled their coats to the side, and they all had knives. And they told me, "This is your second and last warning. We don't use that word up here."
Mm.
And I don't know if you've ever been scared or really shook. I'm 19 years old, in prison for the first time. I'm scared to death. And these dudes walked up on me and showed me knives. So from that day until recently, I never used the N word again.
He said until
I,
recently, huh?
until recently, I would always say, "Hey, homie, yeah, homie, hey, yeah, hey, peoples, hey, folks." I would not say that N word no matter what.
Right. And so it sounded like they was real. Sound like they was real structured and stuff. Did they have BGFs, vanguards, that type of stuff?
Yeah, they did. I ended up getting in a prison ride in Susanville, and I went to the. They sent me to Tracy. Tracy was called Gladiator School, and the reason it was called Gladiator School because they had no guns inside of Tracy at that time. All the guns were on the yard, right? If you go to
Uh-huh.
prison now, there's guns in the building. You're under gun coverage 24/7. In Tracy at that time, there was no gun coverage in the building. Everybody had a knife. Everybody.
Mhm.
So I go to the hole. When you get in a ride somewhere, they send you to Tracy. You go immediately to the hole. You got a shoe program. So I got a shoe program. Two things changed my life in Tracy. When it's time to go to the yard, because you get there one day, you move upstairs, give you a TV and all of that stuff. The first thing they did was the brothers that came out on the tier for tier time. They told me, "Hey, the teacher's going to come around. We want to put you in. We want you to enroll in education."
Uh-huh.
And I was like, "I don't need no education." And so the teacher came around and said, "You want to sign up for school?" I told him, "Hell no." And he kept going. Well, the next time we had, when he left, they let the other guy out for the tier, and you have shot callers on the tier. You don't know who's who when you first get there. So the shot caller called the guy to his cell and told him go down there and see, KC and tell him blah blah blah. So the guy came down and said, "Look, you either enroll in education or we'll discuss it when we see you on the yard." Well, the way he said it made me realize I don't want to discuss nobody on the yard. Right? So the teacher came back later that day to bring some books. And I said, "Excuse me, yeah, I'd like to enroll in education," right? Mind you, when I went to prison, I had a 10.8 GPA. I enrolled in education. When I left out of the shoe program, the hole, and went to the main line, my GPA went from a 10.8 to a 13.1.
So
So
let me ask you this, KG. So because I've heard a lot about that, right? I've heard a lot about it was a lot of emphasis by the brothers put on other brothers and especially the younger brothers who came to prison to learn, to study, and educate themselves. So that's what was going on.
they knew who you were before you showed up to prison. When you got sentenced and you were on your way to prison, when you walked in Chino, because that was a Southern Reception Center, they knew exactly who you were, what you were in for, and all of that stuff. They knew it.
Right. Because that was back that I've heard at a time when the convicts really ran everything.
Everything. Everything. The police just turned the key. Now, if they were going to send you to Soledad and you had a 3.4 or 5.7 or anything other than a 12-point grade point level, when you got to that institution, the brothers walked up to you and say, "Yeah, man, you are going to enroll in school when you come out."
Uh-huh.
It wasn't no choice. You might want to take up a trade, welding or something. No, it wasn't happening. You were going to school until you graduated high school. You
Right.
didn't have a choice. Okay. The second thing that changed me was the first day on the yard in the hole. The very first day, they got this toilet on the yard, and you know how the gun tower is in the shoe. It
Right.
looked like he could reach out and touch you. Right. That's how close the gun towers are. And so we were out there playing poker, and this guy went to use the bathroom. And I'm like, "Damn, man, that's crazy. Why would you know there's certain things you don't do on the yard, and pull your pants down and be vulnerable is one of them." Well, he went to take a dump, and there's three soldiers keeping ooze around him. And then when he said, okay, he finished, he got up, he came back over to the poker table. And he was sitting there, and dude was playing poker. So the guy who won the pot went to reach for the pot, and the guy stabbed the shit out of him. Stabbed him three
Mm.
times and left the knife in his throat.
So
So dude was clawing on the
the guy who
toilet.
had just went to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
So
so
he went over there and he had a knife hooped.
Yeah, he stood
Oh,
out a
okay.
knife and then stabbed the dude with it, right?
Hmm.
And you learn certain things in prison. When you the knife, you leave feces on it so it'll infect the dude that you stab with it.
So what
So
happened to the dude he ended up stabbing? Did he die?
we don't know because they rushed him off the yard.
Oh, okay.
But they laid the yard down, and police didn't know because he stabbed him 3 times so quick, and everybody, in the shoe, you don't move fast. So everybody got up and started easing away from where he was, and the police noticed that every inmate that was on the yard was against the fence.
Uh-huh.
And he looked down and he seen dude grabbing at his throat and he put the yard down. They got the gurney out there and they took him off the yard and stuff. And then they laid us down and the brothers looked at me and said, "Hey, homie, they're going to call you to come out your cell to interview. Don't come out the cell." Now I'm going to tell you something. A lot of people act like they was tough in jail and all that stuff. I don't know where they get that courage from because when them brothers looked at me and said, "Don't come out your cell," I'm telling you right now, it took the goon squad and some to pull me out that, right? Because I didn't give
Right.
a what was going on. Look, I wasn't coming out that cell. So when they came back and they told me later on, they said, "Hey man, the captain want to talk to you for interview." I said it loud so everybody in the hole could hear me. "Get the away from my cell! I don't want to say nothing." You know what I mean? And everybody started laughing, right? They're like, "That you out of here?" "Hell no! I just seen you stab the guy on the yard in the hole,
Yeah.
and then you told me you don't come out my cell. You ain't got to tell me twice." That's when I knew prison was serious.
And so when you was in prison back then, because you said that there was Crips, but not a whole lot. Was you represented as a Crip, as a Blood, or what was you doing?
Listen, they were killing Crips when I first went to prison. They had an issue. I'm pretty sure you remember that brother. They got
Robert Ballou Jr.
who got his leather coat took and killed at the Hollywood Palladium,
Right. Uh-huh.
and it was all about blackness. And if you did anything to another black oh, for something stupid, when you came to prison, you had to pay for that.
So let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So when you say they, you're talking about the brothers who was already in prison, and I'm assuming the BGF brothers who had a black philosophy or a black way of thinking. They basically was upset that the Crips had killed somebody over a leather jacket, and so basically coming to prison at that time, seeing you was a Crip, your life was in danger.
Yeah, it wasn't no just BGF. Every black revolutionary organization at that particular time had that same mindset.
Uh huh.
Vanguards, BGF, LA Car. Everybody had that mindset. If you came to prison for harming another black over some random silly stuff like stealing his jacket, yeah, you were a target.
So can you explain the difference between Vanguards and the BGFs? Because I think you might be the first individual who I've interviewed on my show that has mentioned the Vanguards.
Okay, these are revolutionary organizations, but the BGF were mostly from Northern California.
Okay.
Okay, uh, most of the leadership at that particular time were out of Oakland. Okay, now you had people from Southern California to join the BGF, but at that particular time, you would never rise to leadership ranks. It just wasn't happening.
Uh-huh.
And it got to the point that they were pressing brothers from Southern California for basically protection. And the brothers from
So
Southern
the
California,
the brothers from up north was pressing the brothers from down south for protection.
yeah, for like, for guys who got visits and, who hit doing business and all of that stuff, or who got somebody to bring them something in and all of that, and they were trying to distribute it. Now, at that particular time, the brothers from up north ran the northern prisons basically, so because they were more structured and organized. And
Uh-huh.
so they would press up on brothers and make them, like pay protection. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
And they would charge them like whatever you get, we get 10% or we get 20%, right? And the
Right.
brothers from the South was like, nah, we don't get out like that. So they formed their own organization. And one of the most prevalent organizations at that particular time was the Vanguards.
Oh, okay. So the Vanguard was pretty much then a down south organization.
Exactly. Most of the people in that were from Southern California.
Were the Vanguard's principles similar to the BGS principles?
Yeah, it was just but uh, they were revolutionaries. They believed in black unity. They believed in everything. The only difference was they didn't believe in pressing brothers and trying to make them pay protection for anything. You know what I
Right.
mean? It was all about how that thing says one band, one sound.
Right.
Yeah, that's how it was. We black. You know what I mean? We move as one, and
So
that was it.
let me ask you about the Southsiders back then. Was they because I always hear that at different periods there was different numbers. Who do you believe was more who had the numbers back then in the prison? Was it more blacks than Southsiders or what do you
Way
remember?
more blacks. Way more blacks.
Uh-huh.
Way more blacks. Blacks were probably about 60-65% of prison population.
Hmm. And so on this show I like to keep it 100. Was the Southsiders still handling their business even though that they was small in numbers or what was going on?
The thing about Southsiders back then, I'm not gonna take nothing from them, and anybody who was back there with me or before me, they'll tell you the same thing. I got mad respect for them because it could be two of them, and they gonna handle their business.
Uh-huh.
They're not gonna roll up. They're not gonna run. They gonna handle their business. It could be two against 50, and they finna handle their business. I give them their props on that. Okay, so it wasn't, if anybody say, oh, they was scared, they was a coward, use a damn lie. You know what I mean? But the thing about it back then is like now they try to press a line. Back then they didn't. You
Uh-huh.
know what I mean? They would just, if this was their area, this was their area, right? But you wasn't going to violate that area.
Right.
Now if this their area and they need more area, they're gonna try to take somebody else's area.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? It wasn't like that then. It was more of a real respect thing back then.
Right. And so you had mentioned something about they had a boxing club and stuff back then.
Prisons back then were set up like college campuses, right? And the whole system was, you can get a master's degree in prison back then. Not through no correspondence. The instructors actually came and taught at the institution that you were in. So you went to class like a regular classroom. You went to class and you learned. And
Uh-huh.
back then, sports was big in prison, right? And like I said, I was in Tracy, and uh, I had a brother named Mac, brother named Kenny Grisby. It's a couple of brothers that I was on the boxing team with, and I fought. I was middleweight, right? And Kenny Grisby was a light heavy. Mac was a heavyweight, and they had this other little young brother, welterweight. This dude was he was. I got to admit he was good and he was fast. And the thing about the boxing program was the sports program period was you didn't just fight people in the institution. At Tracy, you fought the Salinas Boxing Club. You fought people from Fort Ord and people from the Navy, right?
Mm.
And as well as people in the prison. And they had closed circuit TVs in Tracy. So when they had the boxing for that evening, everybody in the institution, no matter where you were, you could turn to the institutional station and you could see the fights on TV. So
Mm. Okay.
if you lost, everybody in prison know you lost.
Right.
And like a couple of dudes that was fat mouthing, they was talking crazy to the police, and the police said, "Man, if you don't shut the before I go back up to the Salinas Boxing Club and get that dude to beat you Friday night," right? So
Yeah.
no matter what, you did not want to lose, right? And so me, I would only spar against light heavyweights, and welterweights. And the guys would ask me, "Why wouldn't you fight somebody your own weight class?" I said, "Well, I spar with welterweights because if I can slip half of his punches, the middleweight can't touch me." And I spar with light heavy and heavyweights because if I can take they punch, a middleweight punch ain't. And that was
Uh-huh.
my philosophy.
Did the blacks and the Mexicans box each other, or how did that
Yeah,
work?
if you were on the sports team, you play sports.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? It wasn't no ifs and buts about it. You play sports. If you beat them up, you just beat them up. It was all part of the sports program. Just like people don't know that they had a football team. Okay, and in Tehachapi, they played all the local junior colleges. And in Tracy, you played against each unit, right? And they gave you the cleats, the pants with the pads, the jerseys, the helmets, the mouthpieces. You got your full football gear, and you played righteous football.
So the teams from one unit would play a team from another unit, and so the teams from one unit, it would be made up of blacks and Southsiders and whites and whoever wanted to play.
Whoever wanted to play,
Uh-huh.
whoever wanted to play. It wasn't the racial divisions that you see in prison now. It wasn't like that back then. Everybody played sports together. Everybody did everything together. You still had your separation, but when it came to sports, everybody worked together. Just like at Tracy, they had a basketball team, and if you made the varsity team, you played against all the local junior colleges in the area.
Uh-huh.
And so you couldn't go out; they had to come in. But they would come in and they would had a closed circuit TV and they would play.
Now earlier you mentioned that you went to the hole for a riot. Who was that? Who was the riot involved? Who was it in between?
Blacks and Hispanics.
Can you remember what was the riot about?
Yeah, some brothers in the dorm because Susanville was all dorm living, and it was 16-man dorms. Well, some brothers had broken into some Hispanics' lockers and was in there stealing, and one of the Hispanics had came back from work early and caught him, and they beat him up real bad. They beat the hell out of him,
Mm-hmm.
and Hispanics got word of it, went to the black leadership because you just can't take matters into your own hand. You had to go through the change of command. So
Oh,
they went
so
to the
so 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 the brothers who was doing the stealing, they jumped on the south side of dude.
who locker they were stealing out of.
Right. So they was double wrong.
They was double wrong. So the Southsiders went to the blacks and told them, "Hey man, listen, um, we want you to handle this, and we want you to like whoop discipline him."
Right.
But now two things happened that caused the riot. They said, "We want you to discipline him till we're satisfied."
Uh-huh.
Right? You can't tell another racial group that I want you to beat him up until we satisfied. That you wrong.
Right.
And the brother's response was, "You don't tell us how bad the whoop is." And so you should have just let it happen. And if you wasn't satisfied, you could have said, "Hey man, that's not enough. Look at what he did to our people." You know what I mean?
Right.
But instead, you try to make demands, and brother said, "No, that." So the Hispanics had went to back to the yard, and if you know anything about prison, people who know, when you hear that term when they say it, because they play it all over social media sometime, when they say the Mexican got their boots on, they got their boots on.
Right. Right. Mexicans got boots.
When we know when we come out of the cell, the first thing we do is we look at the Hispanics' feet. If they don't have their tennis shoes on, if they all got boots on, they all got pants on, we already know something's finna pop. You know what I mean? But if they come out with their basketball shorts and all of that stuff, well, okay, it's a regular day. Well,
Right.
that's what happened. They had came out, and back then nobody really, paid attention. So they came out and said, "Hey, man, it is what it is." And when they broke from their huddle, they just start rushing blacks. They a lot of blacks up
Uh-huh.
because blacks wasn't ready for. They didn't think, they thought they was gonna solve it, and they wasn't on point. And a lot of brothers got stabbed up. A lot of brothers
Uh-huh.
got rushed out to the hospital.
Mm.
So the ones who didn't, when they called us, they called me with a box of knives. So once I got caught with a box of knives, I immediately went to the hole.
Uh-huh.
And then they didn't want me at that institution no more. So because at that particular time you can't be in a dorm if you get caught with knives like that. So they sent me to Tracy.
You had mentioned how the blacks back then was way more structured, and they, it was mandatory for everybody to carry knives. They taught you guys the hit points. Speak a little bit about that.
When I first came to prison, first thing that the blacks teach you is not to be a reactionary. I mean, you literally are in school every day, whether you're in an actual classroom or whether you walking to an OG. And my mentors at that particular time, and people who know, they know. One of my mentors was a guy named Johnny Spain. Okay,
Johnny Spain,
yeah,
I read that book by him.
I didn't know who he was, right? But he was my mentor. We used to kick it every day. And another one of my mentors was a guy named Walter Perkins. We used to call him Walter P. And they would everything was so structured that they would teach you how, like, if you had to stab somebody, because they would send you out in teams. Would no one person go stab nobody unless it was a personal vendetta. If you had to go hit somebody abusing a riot, you had to know where to hit him, because, like, people say, "Oh, well, you just stab him in the chest or stab him in the stomach." No, there's certain femoral arteries that you would stab them, and, like, say that me, you, and somebody else went to get a dude. Okay, now we going to get him, and y'all stabbing him, but I'm hitting his arteries. So
Uh-huh.
when the police get there and put us down, he's gonna bleed out, and that was the whole thing. They worrying about the puncture wounds, but if you hit enough femoral arteries, he's gonna bleed out, so you can save him.
Uh-huh.
So you had to know, and they would ask you, "Yeah, if you got a guy and you had him like this, where would you hit him at?" And you had to tell them, "I hit him in his inner thigh right here with a femoral artery, or I hit him under his arm with a femoral artery, or I hit him in his neck right here." But you had to know where all the femoral arteries was, where you can hit him, where he can bleed out at.
And so, how do you think over a period of time, man, that the brothers got so unstructured? In your opinion, what happened from back in the 70s to the 90s the 90s and 2000s, when it seemed like a lot of brothers wasn't as structured?
Uh, More gangs came to prison, and the police, the correctional officers, because back then, if somebody did something foul and the correctional officers knew, they knew what was supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't even get in the way. If dude was a cell thief or a thief, period, because you don't steal from nobody in prison. You know what I mean? They already knew what time it was. If a rapist came to the line, they already knew what time it was. You know what I mean? So
Right.
if somebody disrespected another race, rather than cause a race riot, that particular group would handle their business, and the police would let it happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what they start doing was locking people up. Like, say you a shot caller, and one of your little homies did something, and you sent some dudes to take care of it, right? Now they would not only lock them up, but they would come and get you too.
Right.
So now when they would lock you up, if you got life, that messes up your board date. So all of them dudes who was trying to go home stepped back. So now these youngsters are doing what they want to do, and they became, you've seen it. Look how disrespectful they had became.
Right. And that was going to be my next question, right? Because so we seen that the blacks were not as structured as they were back in when you first started doing time. So, in your opinion, though, how did the Northerners and the Southerners manage to still stay structured, still stay extremely structured, and while some of the blacks got so lax? What's your opinion on that?
Because they're under one banner. I don't care where you from. Okay, whether you from San Diego, IE, LA, no matter Bakersfield, no matter where you from, you fall under the Southsiders.
Right,
Period.
right,
You're not going to say, "Oh, we from Dago, we do this." No, 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 no. You a Southsider. Period.
right,
Same thing with the Northaniels, right? They under one flag, Northaniels. Period. And when it comes to blacks, we were always separated, North and South. But whenever an issue popped up, we moved as one.
uh,
Psychologically, we let people divide us. You know what I mean? You
right,
let the whites, cause like the whites, when it comes to whites, it don't make no difference. They from up north or down south. They run with the white card.
right.
But with the blacks, they like, oh man, we not after y'all, man. We after them dudes from the north, them northern dudes from Oakland. And then brothers will be like, okay, they ain't got nothing to do with us.
Right.
And then they'll turn around and say, oh man, them Bloods did this to us, so we go get the Bloods. We ain't after no Crips. And Crips will be like, okay, go ahead. We ain't got nothing to do with that. And you can't do that.
And so let me
That
let me ask you, because that's very important, right? I have never seen that happen. When I got to Salinas, there was some tension, and from what I heard is the only reason it didn't jump off between the Southerners and the blacks because the Southerners only had a problem with the Bloods, and since the prison had just opened, they didn't quite know who all the Bloods was. But so you have actually seen where Southerners would get into it with one specific group, like the Crips or the Bloods, and the other group, whoever they wasn't into it with, they would stand down. You have seen that, huh?
Yeah, yeah. It would stand back, let it happen.
Uh huh.
They would tell their people, hey man, the Southsiders are gonna handle some Crips today, or gonna handle some Bloods today. Y'all don't go on that side of the yard.
So that inner dissension among blacks helped play a major part in weakening our structure.
Yeah, it did. But the funny thing was, before I left, because I paroled from Ironwood, right? Before I left, you had a couple of brothers got mad, and they said, listen, we can't fight the whites, the Southsiders, the Asians, the police, and each other.
Right.
We just can't do it. And so at that point, everybody put everything aside, and we became one at Ironwood at one point. You know what I mean? In like 2010, 2011, 12, we had became one. It wasn't you mess with one black, you mess with all of them.
Uh huh.
And so I'm like, yeah, that's how it used to be.
Right. Because another good thing that you mentioned too, with so many different black cars, that you have different teachings. You may have like 6 or 7 dudes who have the juice, on the yard with these black cars, but you may have only 2 or 3 of those dudes who believe in keeping knives, who believe in doing this, and who believe in doing that. And so if the others don't, then of course they're not teaching their homeboys, and so they're not structured that way. Let me ask you this, KC. What was going on back in your days in terms of checking paperwork? Was blacks checking paperwork, or were they not checking paperwork?
They didn't have to. Remember when I told you they knew who you were before you came to prison?
Right.
When you got there, inmates, convicts had your file.
Uh-huh.
They knew what you were in there for. Police didn't do nothing but turn the keys. So you couldn't lie. Like right now, a counselor have to give you somebody's 128G, I think it is.
Right.
Back then, they would get your file, they would open it up, they would find out where you've been, and they were the one who would recommend where you should go. The counselor just had to put his signature on it. So if you wasn't no good, they knew you wasn't going good, and they sent that word way ahead of you. They sent that word to the unit before you even got sent to a unit.
Because earlier you mentioned that you wasn't allowed to disrespect blacks, wasn't allowed to disrespect blacks, whether they were staff or convicts, and they definitely wasn't allowed to sexually prey on other blacks. So in the event a person pulled up with a undesirable case, he would be dealt with.
Immediately. Those guys didn't even try to come to the yard. As soon as they knew they had, because if you've been to prison before, you know how it worked, right? So before you got off the bus, you told the driver, "Hey man, I can't go in there. I got to go to protective custody." And they would ask you what's going on, and they would tell them. And when they would get off the bus, they would take them straight from the bus. You know how you go on reception?
Right.
They would take you. You wouldn't go to reception. You go straight to AdSeg.
So later on, did you see it? Did you see a change in the course of you doing time where homosexuality and preying on other blacks was allowed? And then, if so, why do you think, what was the change for that?
I never seen it allowed. I never seen them allow you to prey on blacks. I did see some like homosexuals that was allowed on the yard,
Uh-huh.
and certain dudes mess with them. But like look at Ant, and old boy, he was in the cell with. Remember?
Right, right. He was Ant was from the Inland Empire, one of the homies, and he was in the cell with a big old giant
Dude,
man who thought he was a woman.
yeah. Now, how many people mess with Ant?
A bunch of them, pretty much
But
everybody.
okay, but how many people actually smoke after Ant, ate after Ant, and all of
Oh,
that
no,
stuff?
nobody done none of that.
Okay, they talked to
Yeah,
him,
right. I mean, yeah,
but
they would talk to him.
that was it.
Right,
Now, in gang culture, if you got caught messing with somebody and you were part of a gang, you had to get off the yard.
right,
So it was never, and then at one time, and in most cases on 3 and 4 yards, I know that when homosexuals arrive on the yard, they don't let them stay. They tell them you got 24 hours to get out of here.
right. They was ran off the yard.
Yeah. So it's never allowed, and I've never been anywhere where rape, robbery, or any other thing was tolerated from one black to another one.
Hmm.
It was just never tolerated because they say I was always taught we have the duty to protect those who can't protect themselves.
Right. I just, I just, I just think that, like you mentioned, due to so many different cars later on, certain type of philosophies was not taught to everybody, and it got to a point where some people just seemed to stop caring because they wasn't taught that to begin with. So it didn't matter to them.
You're absolutely right. I was on the 4 yard at Sentinel 4 yard, and this brother had disrespected Hispanic, and the Hispanics, the Southsiders came and told the brothers, and the brothers said, "Okay, we'll handle it." And they went in this cell. They beat that man within an inch of his life, right? And he couldn't go to trial. You know the routine. He could
Right.
not go to trial, so he stayed in his cell. He did what he was supposed to do. He accepted his ass whooping. He said he was wrong. He wasn't gonna go to trial to bring the people's attention to, you know what I'm saying, so they can start looking for people. So what happened while he was laying in there recuperating, a bunch of youngsters ran in there and took all his shit. He couldn't even fight back.
Uh huh.
They took all his stuff. So I'm sitting at the table, I'm looking, and I'm shaking my head. And so a couple of the dudes that was on the yard, they were calling shots with the cards and shit. They asked me, they said, "What's wrong, OG?" I'm like, "That's some foul shit." And
Right.
they like, "What you mean?" I said, "Look, homie, dude accepted his ass whooping like a man, right? If you go in his cell and take his shit, You a cell thief. How are you guys allowing cell thievery on the yard that you call the shots on?
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? And this dude had already got his punishment. How you going? Because the way I was brought up is, if a dude ain't no good, everything he got ain't no good. His
Right.
TV ain't no good. His radio ain't no good. You don't beat him up, run him off the yard, and steal his. That
Right.
makes you
Right.
just as bad as he is. And so they like, you know what, OG, you right. And they told them dudes, they said, man, at the end of the day, if that dude don't have his back, everybody that went in that cell, y'all getting the out of here. Man, they gave so much back that he got extra.
Right. Right. No,
But
and no, that's right, because like you say, once they deemed whatever his punishment was, and once he took the punishment and accepted, you still don't run in there and steal the man's stuff and all that old type of stuff, and so yeah, that's definitely correct. And because it got to the point where I would see stuff like that from time to time, and it just seemed like enough people wasn't speaking up, because when stuff like that happened, if a person doesn't say anything, you give the impression to those who did it and other people who are watching that stuff like that is cool in similar situations.
and you're absolutely right. And I'm like this. I'm old school. I'm gonna tell you a story real quick. My case, I have 50 years of life, right? My case got overturned under the Three Strike Reform Act. Okay, there was a lot of people in there with me who were also eligible, but what they did was at the last minute they put a switch on it. If you were a known gang member, if you were an admitted gang member, if you were a validated gang member, your case went from non-serious, non-violent to serious.
Uh,
Okay, so a lot of dudes that were supposed to go home didn't because they had them down in gang files. And they would ask me, they was like, hey, Casey, how did you miss that? And I told them, I said, look, when I was came to the pen the first time, I was taught one valuable lesson. You don't volunteer no information to the police. None. You make them do their job.
uh,
Why would you sit there and admit that you a gang member from a gang? You make them do their job.
right.
So when I came back the last time, they asked me, or they said, because when you go through reception now, they ask you, what's your affiliation? And I see dudes up there saying, I'm a Crip, I'm a Blood, I'm this, I'm that. So when it came to me, they said, what's your affiliation? I said, non-affiliate. And they said, are you Crip non-affiliate or Blood non-affiliate? I told them I'm a non-affiliate non-affiliate. And so we got in there and they put me down as a gang member anyway. Well, I wrote a 602, which is a grievance on it. They went from my juvenile record all the way until then. And they said he's not on any gang files whatsoever. So they made him take it off.
Uh-huh.
So when they took it off, when it was time to go home, they couldn't hold me. You know what I mean? And I
Right.
told them, I said, everything you guys do, you running your mouth, you volunteering information. Shut up. Just stop talking. Make the police do their job. Don't do it for them.
Uh-huh.
And that's what everybody's problem is now in prison. You know.
And so let me ask you this. I forgot to throw this in there, because you was back. You initially came to prison back when they had the weights and all that stuff, man. How big were some of the biggest dudes that you seen?
I'm gonna tell you what's crazy. Everybody back then wore a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a shirt, and a jacket. It could be 100 degrees outside, and they would not take none of that off. They work out right there with all that stuff on. Well, one day the yard went down, and you know when the yard go down, somebody gets stabbed. Everybody gets butt naked on the yard, right?
Right.
And they made these dudes take off these shirts and sweatshirts and stuff. I'm sitting there looking like, where the am I at? Because these guys are built like professional bodybuilders. Okay, the biggest dude I've seen. Everybody at that particular time had the smallest arm at that particular time was 18 inches.
Hmm.
The average was 2021. The biggest guy I seen had a 25-inch arm. I mean,
Do
these
you,
dudes were massive.
Do you remember who that was? Who are? Can you remember some of the more bigger dudes that you saw?
Uh, dude named Mad Dog was one. Okay, dude named Big Stan was another one. A dude named Dinky Bird out of Pomona was another one. Uh, a dude named Tweety Bird from 60s was another one. I mean,
Uh-huh.
these dudes were like massive, man. They were huge.
What's the most you may have seen one of those dudes lift on the weight pal, bench
Oh,
press or whatever?
I seen a dude do 450 like it wasn't nothing.
Uh-huh.
Tweety Bird was from 60s, right? He was a 5'2", 5'3". He had to get his shoes specially made because he only wore a size 4.5 shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, on the yard at that time when they had weights, you had 1 hour weight slots. So Tweet came